If we look at the impact that is being realized and that is being felt by the Asian countries, if you look at Japan, Philippines, and if you come to the South Asian countries, they are facing the real brunt, if you like. Even the common man's life has become really miserable because of this war, and because but one thing that really causes a problem, that is that nobody is going to stop this war. Nobody has no country does have that capacity to go and tell United States, okay, the enough is enough, let's stop this war, because Donald Trump is not caring about the United Nations. Donald Trump is not caring about any other international law or something. And if we look at the other side, China is watching silently. How would you say about that? What China is doing, and how China is benefiting from this conflict, or what do you say about that?
It's a big challenging situation, I would say, for any decision maker in the world at the moment. How to deal with this situation? It's nothing easy. And so let's say the American side, they have their own local oil and gas production. Then they have a hand on Guyana and Venezuela. So these are two major South American producers. And via Hess, for example, in Guyana, they're controlling the production. In Venezuela, as we've seen. So in that sense, they are secure in the sense of oil and gas supply for their own industry. Europe has North Sea and potentially Nigeria and Libya as suppliers, but I wouldn't say that's sufficient. Russian supply is falling, and obviously, as Russia is under sanctions. And so for China, I would see their main supplies was coming from the Middle East and coming from Russia. And of course, then you also have South America and USA, but they're not in the situation to be independent like the US is. And from a strategic point of view, they have to manage 1.2 billion people. And that is probably historically also that China has never been like an expanding power, because they have sufficient challenges to deal with their own population. It's I mean, the Chinese strategy goes extremely Sun Tzu. It could be a 30-year strategy, which they are calculating. They're calculating every single possibility in advance, and then they make their decisions on how to do their strategy, because it's a very calculated approach. So I think their strategy is more let their opponents do their mistakes, don't interfere, in the sense like support potentially both sides as long as they are weakening each other, because China could have an interest in Eastern Russia, and could have an interest in further expanding in the Middle East their influence. They don't want to lose the silk route, that's for sure. And so keeping Iran strong is essential for them. But I'm not sure if they are allied essentially with the Islamic Republic, or if it could also be Pahlavi as the leader of Iran. I think they could probably arrange that with the U.S., that both options stay open. But the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. So I would assume that they would prefer working with the one they already know how they are, in comparison to the one they don't know. In their position, and even the whole South and Southeast Asia position, it's extremely challenging, because where are you going to get the alternative supply from, except that it's going to become extra expensive because of the transportation costs, and then the supply is limited anyway. So I do think they would want the crisis to end as soon as possible. So from the Chinese strategy, and I would say there's probably quite a big team strategizing. Initially, it was to stock up as much as possible, so they do have huge oil storage, like safety storage facilities. I don't forget the number, but it should last them for, I think, 6 months. And so from their perspective, I would say that they're just trying to diversify as much as they can for their oil supply. And other than that, I think they would be focusing on weakening their opponent, which would be the US, especially for the Taiwan expansion, but potentially also for other interests in the world.
Okay. Now, how would you suggest those companies and those investors that in this era of uncertainty, we can see that nobody knows what is going to happen next, and I think this is the first time that Gulf countries are actually facing the heat of the conflict of United States. If you look back into the history, when they attacked Iraq, Gulf countries were quite comfortable. When they attacked Afghanistan, there was no problem at all at that time as well. So, but this is the first time that even not only the Gulf countries but the whole world is facing this problem. How do you see what is going to happen? Stagflation, inflation. How the small countries like Pakistan are going to brace it, and if you said that if it continues, things could go worse, especially for because if winter is coming and the war is going on, even Europe can face the consequences as well.
Well, certainly, I think it's something that everybody is concerned about, and has a huge impact on, I would say, probably every household in the world. And so I mean, we have multiple levels of situations. Like we have, for example, highly indebted governments. So seeing that Pakistan is extremely in debt, but you can apply the same applies to Germany, the U.S., and France, and Italy, and so their benefit is that they have a strong currency which is globally in demand, and the demand for the Pakistani rupee, I think, is globally not so strong. And so currently the U.S. benefits, even though they have a huge debt. Like it's very interesting if you were to compare national debt between countries, you will find that countries, let's say like Turkey, have a lower national debt than the US, or in the percentage-wise to GDP. So I'm not talking about volume, but just percentage to the GDP. But nevertheless, their credit rating of the US and Europe is much better than Turkey, for example. And that's simply because the demand and the demand for their currency, but also for their for their government bonds is much higher than the demand, let's say, for the Turkish one or other governments, let's say Pakistan. I'm not sure exactly what is the government percentage to GDP debt of Pakistan. So I think what is a situation is that we're all facing a situation of inflation, and I mean we've experienced, everybody around the world has probably experienced it, and the supply shortage in ammonia and products for farming can have, and as obviously increased fuel prices will likely have a delayed impact on costs, just basic food costs down the line in a few months. And if it continues in an unstable system of global debt, it might be the reason why countries decide, like one of the interests why they decide to preferably go to war than to in order to revamp their debt system. Historically, that was the case, let's say, with the First World War and the Second World War. When you have an overdebted country, it's a way to restart a system. It doesn't sound very good to me and to anybody, but how do you manage with this situation So let's say if somebody is in the field of stocks, my personal opinion, even though the stock market has gone up a bit, is to actually is to assess, like, do you go long or do you short it, right? And what do you short exactly? And so that would be something to think in that direction. It might be going to, like, if there's a conviction that this will be a long-term crisis, which is very likely, because I'm going to throw in an ideology, Zionist ideology, as a steering ideology behind the war. Maybe because they want to get as much as they can before the midterm elections in the US. They want to get it out of the US government. So get the US government into an extended war with Iran.
So, Mr. Kareem, we have discussed a lot of things, why this war has started and who is behind that. And we have also discussed the different routes of energy as well. And we also discussed that how China is getting impacted, and even the Asian and European countries as well. But despite knowing all these things, uh, I don't see any effort by Europe, any effort by China, any effort by rest of the world raising their voice, going to the United Nations and saying enough is enough. At least I don't see any resolution there for this. I must say that there is no healthy voice standing. There is no even protest anywhere happening that enough is enough. How do you see how the world is? It seems like that they have accepted it.
So you actually do see people going on the streets around the world protesting, and they say is enough and is enough. Interestingly enough, people are being let's say if you've seen many videos, people protesting in Germany, and then how they are treated by the police, even though according to the German constitution and German law, Germany would not be allowed to contribute towards war crimes. But it did supply weapons for war crimes, and it provided also media support internally in Germany. So, and this applies to many countries have similar things. So the interesting point is, how is it that leadership acts contrary to what the people want? Let's say recent in the US, the public support for Trump's policy, he's been falling very strongly. And also the support for the Iran war, and even among soldiers in the US, they don't support this war. Nevertheless, Trump is following through on the war. And that's the interesting point, is like, who's running the countries? Like, what is the power that's running the countries that are doing things which are obviously not in the benefit of the country? And so in this respect, in the US, we know it's the Zionist influence, which doesn't mean Jewish influence. A Zionist is an ideology which mostly is Christian, right? And then the Jewish Zionism and Christian Zionism is a little bit different in their long-term goals. So, but in the US, you can say that Netanyahu gets more applause in the Congress than probably anybody else gets, in spite of committing war crimes in Gaza. And in Germany, I would say it's very, very similar to this. And so it's just a power network, which is controlled by just influential people who have similar interests, and not necessarily interests and loyalty towards their own people. Like corruption, let's say you find a lot of corruption in many countries. Let's say in Lebanon, for example, I forget his name, Sassian, something like this, owner of a bank, and the bank withheld the money of the population, but he is sitting at a table with Netanyahu, which discloses certain deeper truths. And so why are countries not doing the best for their people? Is because potentially, and this would be something, it could be like this. I mean, the making decisions is extremely difficult in any leadership role. So it's not easy to make a judgment there. They are tied by financial conditions. In Pakistan, you have the IMF loan. So potentially they don't even have really choices to make, because they're not allowed to make them. Otherwise, the country will go bankrupt, for example, right? So not having freedom of policy could be one of the reasons that countries are just in such a weak situation that they have nothing, they can't do anything else without risking the whole collapse of the country. For example, Egypt, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, Egypt doesn't get any wheat supplies. They don't have sufficient wheat to supply their population. So what happens when you don't have any more bread? And why doesn't Egypt have any more wheat? It was because they stopped producing in Egypt their own wheat, and they've changed the wheat type, and now they have like imported wheat. And so if you have a situation like that, you're not independent anymore. And so I would say it's I mean, why isn't China doing anything against it? I think they do try. I mean, you did have public speeches where they're saying that the U.S. is controlled by Zionists. China did communicate this clearly, but China is not the kind of country which is aggressive in pushing their policy. They are very, very strategic, and I don't think they still see themselves in a position to be, and I don't think they want to be the global superpower. They just want to maintain the status quo, that they have a stability in their country. They can develop technology and become the old China of export,